You know, when you've spent your career reporting on 10 different presidencies, you get a pretty unique view of how power works. For the legendary journalist Bob Woodward, that view isn't about opinions or hot takes. It's built on cold, hard evidence. We're talking tapes, documents, and what people say firsthand. So today, we're going to dive into what his decades of reporting can tell us about power, politics, and the presidency itself.
Okay, this right here, this is the bedrock of Woodward's entire philosophy. We live in a world that is just flooded with speculation and opinions, right? But he argues that the real truth, the stuff that lasts, is found in things you can actually hold, that you can verify. And that one core belief, it shapes literally everything about how he investigates some of the most powerful people on Earth.
So, that's the big idea. But what does it actually look like in practice? Let's break down the method he calls dogged reporting.
I mean, just look at this process. It's so simple, but it's also incredibly rigorous. It's not about grabbing a quick soundbite for the evening news. It's about patiently sitting down with someone who is actually there and asking the most fundamental questions. Do you have any notes from that day? Are there documents we can look at? And then, the killer question, who else knows about this? This kind of methodical work takes time, which Woodward says is the single most important variable in getting to what really happened. It's a huge contrast to the crazy, rapid-fire news cycle we're all used to now.
And you know, his respect for this kind of work goes way beyond his own reporting. When he saw the New York Times' incredibly deep investigation into J.P. Morgan's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, he didn't hesitate to call it a masterpiece. It just goes to show how much he admires any journalism that puts in the painstaking effort, rather than just racing to be first.
All right, so let's put this to the test. How does this whole first-hand evidence approach play out when you apply it to one of the most covered, most talked about figures in modern history? Donald Trump. Woodward actually sat down with him for hours of taped, on-the-record interviews. This is exactly the kind of raw, unfiltered evidence Woodward is looking for. Right there, on tape, Trump isn't using political jargon to describe getting rid of officials he doesn't like. He uses this incredibly visceral language, calling them scum and the lowest form of human garbage. It's just a stunningly direct piece of evidence about his mindset.
Now, Woodward doesn't just see this as, typical political house cleaning. He defines it as something much more personal, retribution, a kind of vengeance aimed squarely at anyone he feels has investigated him or stood in his way. And this theme, it becomes absolutely central to understanding his entire political agenda.
And this focus on retribution led Woodward to zero in on another powerful motivator, hate. And this is where things get really fascinating, because it brings up a direct comparison to another president he famously covered, Richard Nixon. So to really get this, you have to picture the scene. It's 2020, Woodward is at Mar-a-Lago interviewing then-President Trump, and right in the middle of their talk, Trump decides he wants to show him some videos on his laptop. But the videos are, well, they're strange. They're just silent images of his political rivals. You've got Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, playing with some background music. They aren't saying anything, there are no attacks, it's just their pictures. And as they're watching, Trump is standing right behind Woodward, telling him what to see. As each face appeared on the screen, Trump just kept repeating the same word with this deep, utter conviction. Hate. See the hate. Woodward was completely baffled. He's looking at these calm, professional photos, but Trump is seeing this all-consuming hate. It became clear to Woodward that this was more than just a feeling, it was an obsession, the main lens through which Trump viewed anyone who opposed him. And this is where that historical comparison just clicks into place. On the very day he resigned, Richard Nixon, a man pretty much destroyed by his own hatreds, gave a warning. He said, "Those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself." But decades later, Trump comes to the exact opposite conclusion. There has to be retribution. For one president, hate is a poison that destroys you. For the other, it's a political tool. And listen, this isn't some new idea he picked up in politics. Way back in 1989, in an interview with Woodward and Bernstein, he laid out his personal code: never fold, never give in. So this philosophy of constant battle, of never backing down, has been his guiding star for decades.
But what happens when a political style like this, one centered on retribution and constant confrontation, hits the real world? Well, Woodward's analysis shows the incredible pressure this approach is putting on some of America's core institutions, starting with the media.
The media, for instance, is in a period of just tremendous strain. You can see a pattern here, right? From billionaire ownership changing the game at major outlets to social media giants basically backing away from fact-checking. The entire system that supports independent, fact-based reporting is being challenged from all sides.
So how does Woodward personally navigate all this pressure? Well, he keeps his piece of advice on his office wall. It came from the legendary Washington Post publisher, Katharine Graham, right after Nixon resigned. Beware the demon pomposity. It's a powerful reminder for any journalist, or really anyone with influence, to stay humble and focused on the facts, not your own ego.
Okay, let's talk about another institution feeling the heat, the Supreme Court. After a series of really contentious appointments, this question keeps coming up. Has the court lost its independence? Has it just become a political tool for the president who put the justices there?
But here's where Woodward offers this really fascinating, almost counterintuitive take. Based on all his historical reporting, he argues there is absolutely nothing a Supreme Court justice hates more than being seen as a rubber stamp. So what's his prediction? At some point, on some case, they are going to declare their independence so emphatically it will surprise pretty much everyone.
So after digging through all of this, the power plays, the tapes, the personalities, what's the whole point of the presidency anyway? Woodward boils it down to this really powerful, nonpartisan idea. The job isn't to reward your friends or punish your enemies. It's to find the next stage of good for the greatest number of people in the country.
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? It's a question that goes way beyond any single politician or news cycle. In an era that feels so divided, what does that next stage of good even look like? And how in the world do we find it? That's the question Woodward's work really pushes all of us to think about.